Aloha everyone, my name is Dr. Mestisa C. I am one of the co-chairs for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Hawaii chapter, and I'm very privileged today to have been asked to come and share with you my story of loss and healing at today's 2020 International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. This is actually the first time that I've ever shared my story outside of my family and my really tight circle of friends. So excuse me if it takes me a little while or, I have some moments where I might need to take a break. But when I thought about wanting to share my story with you, I thought about all the ways that I normally share things, where I do my keynote speeches or I do my webinars and presentations, that I sit down and I script things and I practice them. And I pick these really great anecdotes and metaphors and just wrap it all up nicely at the end and tying it back to the beginning and all the key pieces. And then I thought about myself 12 years ago when I just started on my journey of healing. And I thought about, would she like that? Would that version of me who was first going through her own process of loss and grief, would she like that? And the resounding answer I came up with was no. She would not like that. And that's okay. So I really started to think about what she needed and what she would have connected to in terms of listening to someone. I don't think I would have been in a place, I'll be very honest, 12 years ago, I don't think I would have at all been in a place to be able to join in something like this. And I am so in awe of everyone who has recently lost someone who is able to do that. I just didn't have the coping skills and I didn't have the support to be able to do that. And I wish that I had, but that's okay. My journey was different and everyone else's is different as well. Maybe it's been a while, some years, and you just found out about this event. Like myself, last year was my first time attending. But I should digress. The me of 12 years ago would not have connected with someone who was sharing their story, and I would have known immediately that it was scripted. I would have said, yeah, she practiced this. She's told this story 100 times. I don't feel like that. That's not where I'm at. And to be transparent, it's been 12 years since I had my first loss, my first death by suicide. So I am further along in this process. But even saying that, it's still the first time I'm sharing. It's a different journey for everyone. And how you choose to do that is fine. It's do what you need to do. But thinking about that version of me back then, I wanted to be able to speak to my own journey at this point without thinking she would be rolling her eyes. And so I sit in front of you very humbled and just sharing from the heart, unscripted, and just saying what comes to me in the moment. I should start where all stories begin, in childhood. I grew up in a very isolated rural area in the South. You'll probably pick up on that accent every once in a while. But I grew up in a community that unfortunately was also steeped in violence. Not a lot of resources were available for us, and all of my sisters and I are survivors of complex trauma. And I definitely had an expectation of what our adulthood would look like once we left that area. And unfortunately, that expectation, it didn't come to fruition because I lost my sister in her 20s. I lost her 12 years ago, and it marked a very long healing journey for me. It marked a transformation process that is actually still happening for me. For me to be able to sit here and talk to you about my own experiences marks that I have been able to move forward in different and profound ways. And when I thought about the whole entirety of it, of what I have been through, from the childhood complex trauma to the loss of my sister, and then 7 years after I lost her, I lost my best friend to a death by suicide as well. All the while, I am trying to get my doctorate degree in clinical psychology, and didn't go into psychology to work with trauma, to work in grief. I said no to those things because it hadn't happened yet. I was still very early on in graduate school and figuring out what I wanted to do. But I was really kind of thinking I would work with the worried well, people who were anxious and going through these life transitions. And then I'd be like, oh, that's great. Let me give you some tips and some pointers. And then life happened, and it took for me this expectation of my adulthood. It took for me this idea of having like not only survived my childhood, but like having succeeded beyond all expectation what I could be from what had happened. And it definitely humbled me. And I'll be honest and transparent in saying I needed to be humbled. I really did. I was in a selfish place in my life, but like who wasn't in a selfish place in their 30s and 20s, But I was just living a life that was very privileged and that I was very lucky to have. And then I lost someone who I loved so much. And it just stopped everything. I had to start thinking about how I would get to the next day. I had to start thinking about how I was going to finish graduate school in the middle of all of this happening. I had to think about my family and how they were going to move forward and figure out how to heal themselves and how I was going to be able to support them. And I didn't know. I didn't have those answers, and I wasn't finding them even when I was looking so much for them. And I found that people loved me and I didn't know what to say. People had just a plethora of platitudes to try to give me, and they just looked so lost when they would try to talk to me because they hadn't been through the same type of losses that I had. They hadn't had to go through this, and they just didn't know what to say and do. And for me, that was a very isolating event and experience. And I just didn't know how to find someone to talk to. I didn't know about AFSP. I didn't know about ISOSL. I just didn't know about these kinds of resources, even though I was in the mental health field. So I just kind of stumbled along and tried to finish my degree, was there for my family, and became very confused when our healing processes started to diverge. I wanted to talk about what had happened. I wanted to talk about my sister, and my other sisters and some of my family members just didn't. They just couldn't do that. I moved out of my anger and my resentment and my hurt, and some of them still haven't or are still working on that. And that was really difficult to think. We were just in such a different place from each other, and it's so hard to support each other when you're hurting and I'm hurting, but we're not even hurting in the same way. They don't often talk about that, about the differences in grief. They don't often talk about how you're going through such a unique transformative process. And if I really thought about it now and thought about what the last 12 years has brought me, it would definitely be transformation, but it'd also be gratitude. And the me from 12 years ago would definitely have rolled her eyes at that word, at gratitude. She would have scoffed at the idea that anything good could come out of so much hurt. And she would have been wrong. And that's okay. I honor that she was there, and I honor that that was me, and that it has taken this long to kind of find my place in all of this. Because 12 years ago, I lost my baby sister to suicide. And 7 years after that, I lost my best friend to suicide. And there was guilt. There was guilt about being a mental health professional who couldn't even keep that from happening within my own support system. The first loss, there were definitely warning signs, but I lived far away, and the people who were able to give my sister that support didn't understand the importance of the support. I called them, we talked about it, and there was just this level of denial that I couldn't seem to break through. And that's just where they were. And now they are going through their own process with what that means to them and how they're having to make sense of that. With my best friend, I was here, she was on the mainland. I wasn't privy. I didn't see all the things that other people were seeing. And unfortunately, that meant that I missed quite a few of the warning signs. But having been so far in the process of healing with my sister, I was able to say, that's okay. Like, I saw what I saw. I intervened as much as I could and should have, depended upon what I saw. But still, sometimes, you do your best and you still lose people that you love. And I realized that guilt wasn't helping me move forward. Guilt was keeping me back. It was keeping me from really seeing and being grateful for what these losses have brought me. It made me more mature, which obviously, like I said before, I kind of needed. It also gave me a much wider view of life. And even professionally, when I said I'm doing work with the worried well, my clientele started to transform kind of on its own. People who had come in and just wanted to talk about these like small transition pieces, they felt something in me. They connected to something in me, even though I wasn't even sharing what I had been through, and honestly never did share what I had been through. There was just some part of me that connected to that, just maybe it was instinctive that they knew that I had also been through something similar, and they started sharing stories of complex trauma and grief and loss with me. And we kind of went on that kind of journey together with each other. I got to watch them transform. I got to watch them get to these beautiful places of healing on their own. And it really motivated me to say, I'm going to keep on mine. I'm going to keep making my steps forward. I'm going to keep having gratitude for the two people in my life who, yes, though I lost them to suicide, they also are huge motivating factors and forces that keeps me working in suicide prevention, that keeps me working in mental health and changing these public health systems, that makes it possible for me to sit in front of you today and share a story that I never thought I would share with anyone. When you are getting your doctorates in clinical psychology, you're not supposed to share your personal story. It's about the person sitting in front of you. And I do think that that's appropriate. I do think that that's the way it's supposed to be, that I'm fully present for someone else's story and healing process instead of putting my own onto them. But I think it's equally important to know that loss happens to all of us, and that even someone who has that background, that training, that experience, that I struggled. I still struggle on some days, and I teach self-care and coping skills to my entire community. And I say this in all honesty and humility, that I teach it and I'm passionate about it because I need it. I need to use it. I need to be able to help myself heal with it. And so when I talk to people about, I am passionate about self-care and coping skills, they feel that and they know that. But the story behind it is because I had to learn it. I had to learn it over 12 years to be able to be in a place where I am now, to be using it right now, to be able to share the story. I had to learn it the first 7 years so that when I experienced my next loss, that I was prepared in a way. You're never fully prepared, but I knew that I had what I needed to be able to breathe, to get to the next day, to support my other friends and loved ones who were also experiencing that loss, to be able to be fully present in my own grief and know that this was going to be what it looked like. That is what I gained from the first time that I went through this. Everyone's process looks different. Yours is going to look different than mine as well. And though at the 12-year marker, this is what mine looks like, I am clearly an advocate for suicide prevention and mental health. I go out and I try to be a support to my community. It doesn't mean that that's going to be your process or what you go through to get to your place of peace either. Everyone's is absolutely different, unique. And I think that is the wonder of how we get through this loss, is that I hear so many beautiful stories of people finding meaning and helping others and planting memorial gardens and just doing so many different wonderful things in honor of what they have learned and what they have lost. And so I look at my journey as my legacy. I look at my grief as a legacy, as a gift that was given to me. And maybe that is a strange way of thinking about it, but I had a wild, rebellious sister who was the baby, who any system that she found that she didn't like, she was going to tear the walls down. She was a quintessential rebel, and I loved that about her. And she taught me to advocate for system change. She taught me to just embrace and embody that part of her personality that said, that's not good enough and that's not okay. We're going to fight to make that better for as many people as possible. So that's her legacy that she gave to me that I now share with other people. My best friend, Lisa, she was the embodiment of fun. You couldn't have a bad day around her. She just lit up a room. Everything was fun and everything was just brilliant. Her laugh was infectious and you could see her from a mile away. You could hear her from a mile away. And just thinking about her definitely brings a smile to my face when I kind of track back on all the moments that we shared together. And that is my legacy that I get from her, is that even when there's a hard day, to find something that brings you joy, that brings a smile to your face, that reminds you that life isn't all hard and challenging things, that it's also fun. It's about your approach to life. And though, these are legacies that have been hard and brokenheartedly earned, they are legacies that I embrace and hold dear and will continue to embody and move forward in my life. And I hope that I can do them just an ounce of justice in being that rebel with a cause, in being that bright, ray of sunlight in another person's life. I actually, I was a child too, and I was temperamental and cranky. That is the legacy that I would bequeath to someone else. And that still is part of who I am. It would be, it would be wrong for me not to also give myself space and say, this is who I am. These are the things that I'm passionate about. And they sit and are complemented beautifully by the things that have been given to me by Kristen and Lisa. And I think that, even as far back as maybe 7 years ago, I don't know that I could have sat in front of you and even said their names and talked about the loss and kind of how I went through it. But now today, being surrounded by so many people who are brave, who are sharing their stories, are so courageous to sit here and also like share with each other, to have come to these events like every year, it definitely inspired me to come and do the same. And though it may not be the most eloquent speech, it may not be the speech I thought that it would be, it is definitely from the heart, and it is definitely what I of 12 years ago would have been okay with. And that's the gift I want to give to myself, is something that would have been something for me to hold on to. So thank you for joining me today, for sharing in my story, and for providing so much support to me as I share my story and continue to move forward. Mahalo.